Hello everyone. Extreme Phase is ASUS's latest voltage regulator module design, or the so-called VRM. The function of the VRM is actually very similar to the car engine. When you buy a car, you pay the most for the engine, but you don't pay as much for the leather chair, the cool stereo, right? Or if you ask yourself another question, why are all the first-class car makers like Ferrari or Porsche are so proud of their engine technology? This is because a good car engine not only guarantees stable operation, but it also generates the biggest horsepower or dispatch heat effectively to cope with long hours driving. When you buy a piece of motherboard, the VI module does exactly the same thing for you. The other small features like PCI slots, power cables, or the SATA ports are just like optional car accessories. But a good power design, like the ASUS Extreme Phase, brings you extra performance, extra stability, and extra cool. Today, we'd like to show you how good the ASUS Extreme Phase is by 3 tests. However, before we start, maybe you'll find it interesting by telling you what exactly a phase is. Now, what we have here is an ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe motherboard. If I can draw your attention to the area near the CPU, as you can see, there's one choke, one capacitor, one set of MOS feet, and if we turn the board around, one driver. All that compose one phase. Obviously, the more phases you have, they take turns to do each other's work. You got cooler working temperature, you got more stable system, and therefore better performance. However, based on the current technology limitation, one driver can only control one phase. But if you look at the competition on the market, some other vendors claim they got 12-phase technology. You may see 12 phases, 12 chokes on their boards, but what they didn't tell you is there are actually only 6 drivers underneath it. It's very strange, isn't it? But anyway, let's start with the first test we're going to do today, which is to show you the extra stability brought by the ASUS Extreme Phase. The VRM module is like the guard filtering the power being injected into the CPU. Therefore, lower ripple voltage can not only prolong the CPU life, but it can also generate better performance when the CPU is under heavy loading. To make it easier for you, later on we're going to project what you see on this small screen onto the wall. The x-axis you see indicates time, and the y-axis indicates the voltage fluctuation. We are going to use the competition board for the first test, and then we'll use the ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe motherboard as a comparison. Now let's see. Okay, if I can draw your attention to the upper right-hand side, the delta value, the smaller, the better. Now, the competition board performance is about 7.8 millivoltage. Not bad, but what about ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe? Wow, it's beautiful, isn't it? Only 2.0 millivoltage. This means Extreme Phase technology guarantees the extra stable power can be injected into your CPU, which may have cost you hundreds of dollars. Now let's move on to the second test. When you drive a car, you put your foot on the accelerator and send more fuel to the engine. While being supplied equal amount of fuel, a better engine can squeeze out more horsepower without wasting any fuel. That's exactly what ASUS Extreme Phase can do for your PC. If you look at this diagram, the x-axis indicates the system loading. The further to the right, the heavier loading the system has. The y-axis indicates the power efficiency. Now, this test we're going to do is a little bit more complex than the previous one. We're going to do several tests on the same board. Each time we increase the system loading by 5 amps, and then we'll mark down the different power efficiency performances. After all the tests are done, we'll link all those dots. Then you'll be able to see a trend of the power efficiency performance of these specific motherboards. So now, as usual, let's start with a competition board, And then we'll use the ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe motherboards with the extreme phase design as a comparison. Okay, so the blue curve illustrates the competition board's efficiency performance. What about ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe with the extreme phase technology? Wow, it's fantastic, isn't it? The ASUS board beats all the competition in every kind of system loading, and in the peak time, you can go up to 96% power efficiency. This is to say you're using almost 100% of the power taken in by your power supply unit if you're using ASUS board with the extreme phase technology. Okay, finally the temperature test. Everyone knows that lower working temperature helps to maintain the system stability. A good VRM design not only generates stable voltage, have good power efficiency, but it also generates less heat. So now as usual, we set up both machines. On my left, the competition board. On my right, the ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe. Both machines have been booted up for 30 minutes now, and they come with exactly the same specs. Later on, what we're going to do is to use this IR machine, as you can see here, to show you the working temperature of these two different machines. So now let's start with the competition board. If I can draw your attention to this small screen, as you can see, there are quite a few red spots near the VRM module area. According to what we just said, this means the working temperature of this area is now above 75 degrees Celsius. So let's move on to the ASUS P5Q3 Deluxe and see how it goes. It's quite a big difference, isn't it? As I said, both machines have now been booted up for 30 minutes and they come with the same specs. But on the ASUS board, you see a lot less red area, and the temperature of the most area around the VRM module is still quite low. So this is to say the ASUS motherboard with the extreme phase technology brings you the coolest working temperature. To sum up, ASUS Extreme Phase is ASUS' unique VRM design. The power design is very critical to the motherboard, just like the engine is to the car. You can save money on the number of PCI slots, SATA ports, or the firewires, but you should never save pennies on this fantastic pioneering technology, which can bring you a lot more benefit in return. ASUS Extreme Phase, your best choice.